both
these
all over the
guys,
place.
come on. All right, The Hill's coming up right now. I'm Elizabeth Vargas. We'll see you tomorrow night.
Elizabeth, thank you. Welcome to The Hill here on NewsNation. And tonight, Trump takes the town. Republicans rallying around the top of the ticket as Donald Trump descends on D.C. Comments he made behind closed doors about one American city are now in dispute, plus a major ruling at the Supreme Court, but not on the underlying issue. A unanimous decision on birth control, as Democrats warn the fight is not over. Also this evening, a huge settlement between the Mouse and the governor. So who in the multi-billion-dollar fight between Disney and Ron DeSantis won? Plus, political activists stormed the field, stopping a charity baseball game. And that's when Chants of USA broke out, and why one major American outlet is now saying your golf swing could be the secret to professional success. Come on in, I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. And welcome to Washington tonight. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. As President Biden is abroad this evening, the commander-in-chief attending meetings at the G7, his political rival took over most all the attention up on Capitol Hill. Donald Trump meeting with Republican members in the House and then the Senate today, rallying conservative lawmakers behind his central campaign themes.
We have great unity. We have great common sense. A lot of very smart people in this room. They want this country to be great again, and we're going to make it great again.
Now, there is a big dispute tonight about what Trump might have said behind closed doors to House members, as it was reported that he called Milwaukee, the site of the upcoming RNC convention, a, quote, horrible city. Now, one of the members who represents part of the Milwaukee area and was in that meeting will join us here on The Hill to tell us what he heard and if he takes any exception at all. But first, come on in, Mick Mulvaney, former Trump White House Chief of Staff, NewsNation contributor. Mick, hello. Good evening to you. I wonder what you made of what you saw and what you heard today with Donald Trump coming to Washington, rallying Republicans, and the folks that you talked to. What are they saying, Mick?
Yeah, we've seen hints of this, Blake, throughout the Republican primary. Every now and then, Trump, after a big win, would go on stage at night and encourage Republicans to all come together. He didn't do it after every single primary, but a lot of them. You started to see that it's a new sort of discipline within the campaign. I think this is just the natural outgrowth of that. Here's why it's important. I think Donald Trump learned a valuable lesson in his first term. It's always better to have your party in charge of the House and the Senate than not. He had a lot more fun and was a lot more productive with the Republicans in the House and the Senate. And it was during the second half of his first term, specifically when the Democrats controlled the House, that he got impeached a couple of times. He's learned that lesson. And now he knows that even if he wins, if the Republicans don't control the House and the Senate, he's going to have a miserable second term. So he's out there fighting hard for these folks, and they want him to help them win their races. So this is sort of the coming together of the Republican Party. Not everybody. You know, there's some senators who didn't go today. There's some House members who probably still don't like him. But generally speaking, he's the head of the party. He knows it. They know it. They sink or swim together.
So one of the more interesting moments, and I want to show the picture for our audience here on NewsNation, those listening on Sirius XM, what the audience is seeing is a handshake from Donald Trump with Mitch McConnell. It was taken by our friend Doug Mills. You know Doug well, I do too. Here's the image of the New York Times in which Trump shakes the hand of Mitch McConnell. What I found interesting, Mick, is not that this happened, but that Mitch McConnell went out and said, you know, I shook hands with Donald Trump, and I did it multiple times. Mitch McConnell wants you to know tonight that he shook the hand of Donald Trump. What's this all about, Mick?
Mitch McConnell needs Donald Trump to do well. If Donald Trump screws something up very badly going into November, it could cost the Republicans control of the Senate. Granted, these two men do not like each other, period, end of story. But in many ways, their fortunes rise and fall together. So they say that politics makes strange bedfellows. Ordinarily, that involves people, you know, from different parties or from violently different sort of backgrounds than the former Republican president, the Republican leader in the Senate. But there's some strange bedfellows in there as well, and McConnell and Trump are one of them.
Mick Mulvaney, former Trump White House Chief of Staff, NewsNation contributor. We'll see you back here in about 25 minutes or so for Hot Mic with Mick. Catch you then, Mick.
Thanks, Blake.
All right, you got it. Hanging out with us here today on The Hill, Bob Cusack, editor-in-chief of thehill.com. Linda Tran is a Democratic strategist, and T.W. Rigi is a former communications aide to Senator Lindsey Graham. Hello to you all. Nice to have you all in. The commander-in-chief abroad, and Donald Trump sucked up all the oxygen. Bob, I wonder what you took out of and what you're hearing today from what happened behind closed doors.
I think it was a very impressive show of unity. I mean, we know that there are Democrats who are not crazy about Joe Biden, especially because of Israel, and Republicans are divided somewhat on Trump. But I think they're more united than ever. I mean, the fact that, as you guys were talking about, that he is shaking hands with Mitch McConnell, who hasn't talked to in a couple of years, and he is endorsing Larry Hogan in Maryland. So that is a huge deal.
I want to ask you about that because Larry Hogan, after the Trump verdict in New York, Larry Hogan came out and basically said, we got to respect the decision. And the Trump campaign, Laura Trump, I'm paraphrasing here, basically said, that's it for you. That's the end of your campaign. And then Donald Trump came out today and said, Larry Hogan, who's the Republican in Maryland, I live there. I can tell you there's not many Republicans there in that state. They need that seat. Larry Hogan's team said they knew nothing about this, and Trump decided to endorse him.
Yeah, it's an incredible show of unity.
He fits the state, right? And Trump learned a lot of lessons, like Mick just told us. He knows that you need a governing majority to get anything passed. Infighting has hurt our party so bad in recent years, not only on Capitol Hill, and we saw today Donald Trump telling Marjorie Taylor Greene, I hope you're getting along with Mike, Speaker Johnson. He knows that he needs everyone rowing in the same direction. I saw he was at the NRSC meeting with all the senators when I was there last cycle. Infighting, I felt like, hurt us and cost us seats. We can't have that again. Donald Trump knows that.
I mean, I think it's just a reflection that he understands how close this is and how high the stakes are, right? I mean, I think ultimately they were hoping that Hunter Biden would not be convicted and that would be another fundraising tool for them and that they could continue to hammer on this message that they think the justice system is rigged against the former president. And so the polls are tight. Everything's going to come down to really narrow margins, and including in a state like Maryland, that's going to be really important to him.
Trump, so this was behind closed doors, right? He met with the House, he met with the Senate. By the way, he also met with business leaders, the Business Roundtable, which is a group of CEOs here in Washington. One of the big takeaways, because I was wondering, what did he say behind closed doors, right? Like, what's he telling Republicans? What's the policy stuff? There's reporting, Bob, that Donald Trump floated eliminating the U.S. income tax and replacing it with tariffs. Essentially, your taxes go away, but we're going to tariff everything. Not everything, but a lot. Is that real?
Well, it's going to be very difficult to get through that through Capitol Hill, even if they have everything and they use reconciliation where they wouldn't need 60. I don't see that happening. But I think that Trump has also floated we're not going to tax your tips anymore. I think that's a good idea. So he's thinking outside the box. And honestly, I think that the president right now, I mean, what would Joe Biden do in a second term? It's not really easy to come up with a 1, 2, 3.
It's so funny you say that because I was talking about this with our team last week. I see all these articles about what a Trump second term would look like. I have no clue. It's not reported on what a Biden second term might look like.
Well, I think that's because the first Biden term has been full of lots of programmatic and policy achievements. I mean, how often were we talking about infrastructure week before Joe Biden was in office? That is $1.2 trillion that are fixing roads, that are building bridges, that are creating jobs. So I think in a second Biden administration, you would see more of this sort of investment and also more investment.
You're not leaning into the economy right now, are you?
Well, I mean, come on.
Please do. Because that's the pinch point, is it not?
Well, I think that there's no question that there are jobs being created under this president. I mean, the type of economy that he inherited was tough. So he's now dug us out of it, and we're continuing to invest.
But don't you think it'd be good for this president to say, because politics is about looking forward. Now, of course, Trump looks back to 2020 in a lot, so that's a fault. But outlining, this is what I'm going to do for you in the next 4 years.
Yes, for sure. However, I also think that politics is always just an exercise in comparisons. And in this particular cycle, more so than probably the last several cycles that we've had in the presidential, it's going to come down to who do the voters like.
By the way, Congressman Anthony D'Esposito is out there. He's miking up right now. He was inside the meeting today. I'm going to bring him in a second here. In the control room, if you can, tee up the Logan Paul soundbite, because while we sit up here and talk about Washington and behind closed doors and this and policy and all that, Trump's embraced crypto. Trump's been to SneakerCon. He's talking to Logan Paul. right now, and he's trying, it seems like, to embrace a much different demographic. There's an interview that's going to drop, I believe, today, if it hasn't already. Get your reaction on the other side.
We'd like to extend the invite to Joe Biden if he'd like to come on this podcast.
Yeah, I think eventually. You should. You know what chance you have of getting him on? I'd say less than 1%. Okay? If you did that, I'd actually watch that one.
What's he doing here?
Well, first of all, no shot Joe Biden's going on that show. And also I want to make a point that if Logan Paul wants to fight his brother Jake, he should spend more time in the gym and less at Mar-a-Lago. But there was a story out in Axios today showing the inroads that Trump's making with young voters. Trump is very online, okay? Something you can't really say about Joe Biden. And he's talking to...
Well, they're trying to do it just in a different way with, like, shorter, snappier videos.
Right? It doesn't. No one thinks that Joe Biden knows who those TikTokers are that he's meeting with. They think that Jake and Logan Paul, their content has gotten in front of the president. He's trying to segment the youth demographic, pick out young men, and hit people where they are. I think it's really smart.
All right, inside that meeting today with his colleagues, the congressman from New York, Anthony D'Esposito, a Republican who, by the way, is in a swing district. His race will be one of the more closely watched ones this upcoming November. Congressman, I know there's been a lot of action up on the Hill today. You raced to the camera for us. We appreciate it, and thank you for your time. Thanks for being back with us here on the Hill. I don't know if you heard me or not talking about what Trump floated behind closed doors. I'm wondering if you heard it or not. This idea of eliminating the U.S. income tax and replacing it with tariffs. Are you for that?
He did, but he made it very clear it was an idea, something to think about, something to talk about. But he also made very clear the issues that we need to focus on in the next few months, and that is the border. It's obviously inflation, it's our economy, and it's about working together. It's about being a unified Congress and getting our message across to the American people. That's really the most important message that was delivered by President Trump today.
Do you think that's real, though? I know I just heard you say it's an idea. You think that's real?
I think it's something that he's floating around. Listen, President Trump's a very smart man, very successful in business. I think that it is time that we hold our adversaries accountable. Obviously, President Biden has done a very poor job in showing strength as a country. It's one of the reasons as to why we've seen our adversaries take advantage of allies. And I think that President Trump is already thinking ahead to January of 2025 when he is once again president of the United States.
You talk about adversaries, you talk about strength. Congressman, you voted for Ukraine aid. Congressman Matt Gaetz, your colleague, says today that behind closed doors, the former president said of Ukraine, quote, "They're never going to be there for us." And he suggested that we should have paid U.S. troops instead of sending billions to Ukraine. Did you get your vote wrong, or does the former president have it wrong?
Listen, I don't think that we're going to agree on everything. I think that politics and government is about compromise. It's about having conversations, and it certainly doesn't mean that we're going to agree on everything. I'm sticking with the vote that I made. I think that sending funding to Ukraine is a better idea than sending young men and women from the United States of America.
So what about, and it's interesting, and one of the reasons, sir, that I wanted to talk to you, you're on the show often, but you were in the room today, but you're in one of these followed districts. And we saw what just happened with Larry Hogan, right? I know he's not in the House, he's in the Senate, but he is a Republican. And the former president seemingly surprised the Hogan team today by endorsing him after they told Larry Hogan your campaign was over. And I hear you say, Congressman, that you can't agree with the former president on every single idea, and I think most folks would think that's commendable. But what is the line, I wonder, as one of these swing districts that you have to walk of trying to win your race but not upset the top of the ticket?
Well, I think that President Trump made it very clear today when he explained the fact that we do need to be unified, and we also need to lean on the actual candidates, the members who know their districts best, to make the decisions that are in the best interest of the people that sent them there. And that's what I will keep doing. Listen, I represent a district that Joe Biden won in 2020 by 16.5 points. I have the most Biden district of any Republican in this country. And I will tell you that over the last couple of weeks, we received a poll back. And in a district that President Trump lost by 16.5 points, he is up by nearly double digits, and I am right there with him. This is a very different year. It's a different economy. It's a different country. And there are people, different demographics that historically... I think New York is in play, and it's one of the things that he talked about in that room today. New York is in play. Governor Hochul and the state Democrats have made our state a complete disaster. Cashless bail, criminal justice reform, what we've seen recently with congestion pricing. I mean, she is probably one of the most ineffective governors we've ever seen. And we are going to take that, and we are going to make sure that the issues that the Republicans are behind are on the right side.
What did he tell you about New York being in play?
He said that, a few weeks ago he was in the South Bronx, and the crowd that was there enthusiastically supporting him. Demographics that historically have voted Democrat. African Americans, Hispanics. I will tell you, part of my poll, we polled nearly 60% of Hispanics were voting and supporting myself and President Trump. Only 18% of the Hispanics polled in my poll were Republicans. That tells you that there's a shift, there's a seismic shift, and there's something that people are feeling. And they're tired of Joe Biden, they're tired of the disconnect that he has from the American people, and they are ready for President Trump to lead.
Congressman Anthony D'Esposito from the state of New York, breaking a little news there for us today on what the president said behind closed doors. Congressman, thank you.
Thanks for having me.
And as we know it, the president has been campaigning in the state of New York, in part because his criminal trial was there, so it was the easiest, most convenient thing for him to do. He also recently campaigned in New Jersey. Why? Potentially just down the road. He thinks it's in play. Those two states have been blue for quite some time. We'll see if they are. Still to come here from the Hill over the next 44 minutes or so. Clues on a commutation, perhaps, or not. President Biden asked abroad today if he would commute the sentence of his son, plus the mouse versus the governor. It's resolved. So who won in the very public spat between Disney and DeSantis? And our Kelly Meyer, live from the Supreme Court. A unanimous ruling on a decision that divides this country. Plus Mick Mulvaney coming up as well. And coming up tonight on Balance, NewsNation's Robert Sherman reports exclusively from the USS Eisenhower. That's after the Hill. You're watching the Hill here on NewsNation. All right, welcome back here to the Hill on NewsNation. So the Florida governor, Ron DeSantis, and Disney appear to be ending their years-long fight. The DeSantis-appointed tourism board unanimously approved a new $17 billion developmental deal with Walt Disney World. It means a new 15-year expansion. Now, the deal also calls for Disney to spend at least $8 billion at the resort during the first 10 years of the project, ensure 15% of its total spending is on Florida businesses, and invest $10 million on affordable housing in Central Florida. Disney is also dismissing a federal lawsuit against the governor. Come on in, Mark Caputo, national political reporter for The Bulwark, or as I say all the time, no one knows Florida politics better than this man right here. All right, Mark, I was reading and trying to figure out someone's got to win and someone's got to lose, right? This was a nasty public battle, and I couldn't figure it out. Who won this thing, DeSantis or Disney?
I mean, DeSantis, it's really hard to fight the government and win, and in this case, the reality is this. Ron DeSantis just got mad at Disney and said, you know what, you've got this self-governing tax district, I'm going to take it away from you. Disney then pulled a fast one and thought they found a way to circumvent the self-governing tax district. They sued the government, and it turned out their lawsuit was not going to last. That's why they withdrew it, and they were going to have to do business with the DeSantis-appointed board. I mean, the reality is this doesn't really affect anyone that much in Florida. However, DeSantis, perhaps to his credit, got Disney to build a little more affordable housing. It's sorely in need in Central Florida and all over Florida. But this is just sort of a leftover fight from the quote-unquote don't say gay bill, which was also sort of misnamed, and that was a mess.
Yeah, for sure. So I was looking at the timing, though. This started in February 2023. DeSantis announced he was running for president in May. That's when we were all talking when, not if, Ron DeSantis was going to run for president, right? He bows out of the race in January 2024 when things didn't go so well for him. And then, oh, by the way, in March, all of this is just fine. I'm not sure there's much coincidental in politics, Mark, but was this just a presidential ploy? I know you say he won, so he came out on top, but was it just a ploy as he was running for president?
I think it's more like DeSantis wanted to flex, and he had absolutely no reason to change the governing board that oversaw Disney's taxing district. But he decided to do it anyway just to prove he could do it. It used to be that Disney cast a really big shadow over Florida, a really big shadow over Tallahassee, and DeSantis just did what he wanted to do, and Disney was powerless to stop it.
DeSantis flexing, and as Mark Caputo says, coming out on top here on this one. Mark Caputo, national political reporter for The Bulwark. Wish we had more time. Catch you soon, buddy.
Thank you, man. See you.
All right. See ya. In Italy today at the Group of Seven summit, the G7 summit, President Biden and Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelensky signed a 10-year security agreement. That agreement includes military training, weapons assistance, and intelligence sharing. Now, it was also the first time the president publicly addressed his son's guilty verdict, Hunter Biden, telling reporters when asked if he would commute his son's sentence, no. Bob, so he's over there for, obviously, this is a big deal, right? That should have been the headline today. Biden stands with Ukraine and Zelensky, 10-year agreement. But now he's got this.
Right. And you knew he was going to be asked, especially he initially said he wouldn't pardon him. But then the Biden world couldn't answer the question on commutation. Right. So he was going to now, I think.
Do we believe him as the follow-up? Because he's got to answer that way now.
Right. He's saying for now, basically, I'm not going to do it. He can change his mind. I think he is going to commute or pardon his son at some point, but not until after the election.
Yeah, not until after.
And if he does that, then he should just turn around and do it the same to Donald Trump. Which if he has that, if he has that legal ability, correct.
He could call on Hochul to do it in
right. He would probably have to make good to try to do it to Trump as well to negate the issue. But that ain't happening before the election.
You were a right hand to Pete Buttigieg. I wonder what you would tell the president or the White House in this.
I would tell him to do exactly what he did. I mean, what Bob just described. Well, he's got to hold the line on this and, demonstrate that he's putting the legal system above all else right now. Otherwise, he's opening a can of worms we were just talking about earlier. Right. You've got this dynamic with Trump and with Hunter, and if it seems like there's some toying around with the system, that is bad news for him.
Sentencing for Hunter Biden at some point. There's also the tax case, which starts on September 5th, 2 months to the day before the November 5th election. All right, there's still much more ahead here on the Hill. On the other side of the break, Hot Mic with Mick Mulvaney. Welcome back. The former White House Chief of Staff tells us what he's hearing, what he is thinking. We're going to talk about something, Mick, that happened this afternoon overseas with the president and the press. You saw it, right?
I did. Looking forward to that. Also may talk about Justice Alito a little bit, the congressional baseball game. I will not be there for the conversation about Seersucker Day, so I put on my Seersucker suit for this segment, or my shirt. Okay. This is a Seersucker shirt. We can talk about that as well. There
you go. Mulvaney, other side of the break. You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation. Coming up, by the way, on NewsNation, an exclusive ride-along with ICE. Not at the border, but it's in a major American city. See how immigration is the issue far beyond the border as well. 9 o'clock Eastern here on NewsNation on Monday. We'll be right back. Welcome back here to The Hill on NewsNation. Access to the abortion pill mifepristone remains available in the United States. Today's Supreme Court decision, though, rejected an effort by anti-abortion groups to roll back its availability. The court found anti-abortion doctors who challenged the FDA's approach to regulating the pill to be mailed to patients without an in-person doctor's visit did not have any legal standing to sue. This is currently a win for abortion rights supporters. Now, despite the ruling, access to the pill is still largely dependent on state laws. Currently, 14 states enforce bans on abortion at all stages of pregnancy, with others limiting how mifepristone can be prescribed. Abortion is set to become, as you know, a key issue among voters in the presidential election cycle, especially for Democrats. Both President Biden and former President Trump's campaigns reacting to the ruling just hours ago. NewsNation's Washington correspondent Kelly Meyer joins us live at the Supreme Court with the reaction. Kelly?
Yeah, hey there, Blake. Both sides weighing in on this and showing that this issue, as you said, clearly isn't going anywhere before November. We heard from a senior advisor with the Trump campaign, with the Biden campaign, rather, telling us, quote, it's a devastating mistake for voters or members of the media to take away from today's ruling that medication abortion is now safe from what they call MAGA attacks. Now on to the Trump campaign response. And as the former president seemed to do today here in Washington, trying to keep the focus on the future. They're saying the matter is settled and that this election is, quote, about correcting the weaknesses, failures, and dishonesty of what they call the Biden crime family. Now, both campaigns seem to be focusing on what's next here, both saying that this really isn't going anywhere, and it's likely looking to be a topic that we're going to see on that debate stage coming up here very quickly in 2 weeks. The first time they'll be discussing this since Roe versus Wade was overturned now 2 summers ago. Blake.
Kelly Meyer, live for us outside the Supreme Court here in Washington. Kelly, thank you. All right, time now for Hot Mike with Mick. The former congressman, budget director, White House chief of staff tells us what he's thinking, what he's hearing. All right, Mulvaney, I know you got the White House chief of staff title, but now you officially have a television graphic, so you have made it, sir. Yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I needed to talk to you about the lighting on those shots, but that's fine. So Steigerwald's going to have a cow because I'm not wearing a tie in one of those pictures, but that's okay.
All right, as long as we make Mrs. Mulvaney happy with the choice of picture selection, I'll take it. All right, let's move on here. Among Republicans and conservatives, IVF. Senators Ted Cruz and Katie Britt, they issued a joint statement today on behalf of Senate Republicans saying, quote, in vitro fertilization is legal and available in every state across our nation. We strongly support continued nationwide access to IVF, which has allowed millions of aspiring parents to start and grow their families. Now, this comes as Southern Baptist Convention, the largest Protestant denomination in this country, they are calling for restrictions on IVF. Mick, it seems like this is now becoming an issue for Republicans to the point where you had Senate Republicans coming out and trying to get ahead of this today. How concerned are you? Do you worry that this is a factor for your party?
I'm worried about the PR of it. I'm not too worried about what the Southern Baptist Convention did. In fact, I actually took a look at what their resolution says, and the resolution would be consistent with what many Christian faiths believe. The resolution, I apologize for reading, is to reaffirm the unconditional value and the right to life of every human being, including those in an embryonic stage, and to only utilize reproductive technologies consistent with that affirmation, especially in the number of embryos generated by the IVF process. The number of embryos that have been generated and subsequently destroyed as part of IVF have been an issue for Christian denominations, including my own Catholic faith, for a long time. This is not a new discussion. Will it look
no, but
new
that's a lot
in
of
light
words.
of
But
the
that's a
Dobbs
lot
decision?
of words, Mick. Yeah, no, I mean, but that's a lot of words, and at the end of the day, Democrats are going to try to hang this on the president, and they've won. And you know what? Post-Roe, this has not been a winning issue for Republicans.
No, you're right. You could have said that exact same thing a year ago, and it would not have got any attention. But now, after Dobbs, it absolutely does, and I fully expect this to continue to be at the forefront. Doesn't surprise me that that Katie and Ted came out and said what they said today, because this is going to be an issue. Reproductive rights are going to be an issue. It's the only issue I think the Democrats really feel like they can win on. So you can expect to hear more and more of it between now and November.
Okay. All right. In France today, after President Biden signed the security agreement that we were talking about earlier with the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, the president was asked, this was at a press conference. This happens when you go abroad. There's normally press conferences. Presidents are asked 2 questions from each side. And he was asked about the ongoing hostage negotiations in Gaza, Mick. And here is how the president reacted. Watch.
I wish you guys would play by the rules a little bit. I'm here to talk about a critical situation in Ukraine. You asked me another subject. I'll be happy to answer it in detail later. But the bottom line is that we've made an agreement. I've laid out an approach that has been endorsed by the UN Security Council, by the G7, by the Israelis, and the biggest hang-up so far is Hamas refusing to sign on, even though they have submitted something similar.
I wish you guys would play by the rules. Mick, that was a legitimate question in France about Israel. He was standing there with Zelensky, so the White House presumably wanted them to talk about Ukraine. But I cannot tell you, and I cannot tell our audience here on NewsNation enough, or listening to us on SiriusXM, when I was at the millions of Trump press conferences, I never knew when I was getting called on, if I was getting called on, and B, I never ran topics by the White House so that I could potentially get called on. For the president to say, I wish you guys would play by the rules, is absurd, is it not?
Yeah, this is where you and I are going to disagree, and this is because you're in the press corps and I was in the White House. Yeah, these specific press conferences at these what we call bilaterals with other foreign leaders are one of the heaviest, if not the heaviest, scripted thing that a president will do. They will pre-clear who's going to ask the questions, and they will ask those folks oftentimes to keep the questions to the topic of the day. With Zelensky there's plenty of material to talk about on Ukraine without going into Gaza, and that may have been what the President Biden was getting at. Where I think you and I might agree is that where Biden says, I'm happy to take those questions another time. No, he's not. If you're always out there asking questions, answering questions all the time, like Donald Trump was, that's a legitimate answer. If this is one of the rare times you're actually taking live questions, then I think the press has a beef with the White House over. Look, he says he wants to answer our questions, but he doesn't. That's why we asked the question that didn't have to do with Ukraine. But there's a slight difference here because of the setting.
Okay. The White House Correspondents Association today, by the way, put out a statement basically saying we don't play by any rules. All right. Meantime, Mick, one of your favorites. The annual congressional baseball game took place last night with Republicans running all over their Democratic rivals, 31-11. Score doesn't matter, though. It's all for a good cause. But this happened as well. 8 climate protesters arrested after storming the field with a group named Climate Defiance taking credit. Now, they weren't alone. Before the game even started, pro-Palestinian protesters interrupted the national anthem with chanting. Both protesters were met with loud counter chants of USA. And Mick, I should note for you and for our audience, we asked that Climate Defiance group, they wanted to come on the show tonight and talk about it. They ran out onto the field, but they wouldn't come on TV. They wouldn't discuss it with us. Mick?
Yeah, it's about getting attention, right? By the way, I didn't realize that the Palestinian protesters protested during the national anthem. I think that speaks volumes. I mean, how many times have we talked on this show, Blake, about keeping our politics in politics? This is a politics show. I get it. We do politics for an hour. I don't want politics in my sports. I don't want it in my comedy. Right. I don't want it in my Hollywood films. These people last night probably did more harm to themselves than anything. But I got to push back on your comment that the score doesn't matter. The score is the only thing that matters. What are you talking about? We won 31-11 last night.
Is that what you're calling me?
Well, yeah, you're probably giving your kids participation trophies as well. But no, anyway, here's my real problem with the game, Blake, is that, when I was playing, and I played for 6 years, the Democrats had Cedric Richmond. He struck out 17 guys in a 7-inning game one year. I think Ted Kennedy started for the Democrats last night to give up 31 runs. So that's the real issue, is that the Republicans win by 31-11, but clearly it's not the competition it was 10 years ago.
Mulvaney you were the shortstop, is that right?
And leadoff hitter for a while. Did not fare very well against Mr. Richmond. Yeah.
Shortstop, leadoff hitter, former White House chief of staff, got his own television graphic animation. You got it all, my man. Congratulations.
And I have a seersucker shirt on, so there we go.
There you go. Hot Mike with Mick. We'll catch you next time. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Blake.
All right, still to come here from the Hill on NewsNation. Did Donald Trump really say that Milwaukee is a quote-unquote horrible city? One of the members of Congress who was in the room and lives just down the road joins us on the other side of the break. You're watching the Hill.
NewsNation tonight. TMZ's Harvey Levin joins Chris live to dish about the latest details in the Diddy drama. Plus, get a look at never-before-seen details in his new O.J. Simpson documentary. Tonight on Cuomo at 8/7 Central, only on NewsNation.
Donald Trump said when addressing House Republicans right here in Washington. An initial report claimed that Trump described Milwaukee, which, by the way, is the site of the upcoming RNC convention, as a quote-unquote horrible city. However, the former president has since told reporters that he was specifically talking about crime. So let me take you beyond the headline here for a moment and into the data. According to the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, Milwaukee had experienced 3 consecutive years of record-breaking homicides and non-fatal shootings, with those numbers then reversing in 2023. According to Milwaukee police, for example, homicides this year are tracking lower compared to the most recent 2 years, whereas the number of carjackings and robberies has increased. Congressman Glenn Grothman represents the district just north of Milwaukee. He was inside that closed-door meeting earlier today with the former president, and as you can see here, joins us live. Congressman, thanks for being with us here on the Hill. I wonder if you can sort of go back into your memory here and tell us what exactly the former president said, and do you take any issue with it?
Well, he said nothing that I considered an insult to Milwaukee. He made it clear we had to do better in Milwaukee, as we have to do in many of the big cities in the northern United States. But having been born in Milwaukee, raised right north of Milwaukee, there was nothing I found offensive. I think you had, like always, some mainstream media personalities who like to think of an excuse to drag down President Trump. And that's just not true. He said nothing that I considered to be a criticism of Milwaukee. Other than that, we've got to get more of them to be voting Republican in the future.
that nothing that you considered a criticism. The reality, though, Congressman, is you were one of what, a couple hundred people behind closed doors, and your constituents and the people across Milwaukee didn't get to hear that, but they will see Trump calls it a horrible city. And it isn't the reality, sir, that when the president says things like these, I get it, there's nuance, but even when he says stuff like that, it's kind of the stuff that he needs to avoid, and your party needs to avoid along with him, is it not?
Well, he wanted to make it clear we have to do better in Milwaukee election-wise. I mean, he gave like a speech that went from 60 to 70 minutes. And if you have one of our Republicans who is apparently sending out a feed to some liberal reporter, that's what you're going to get. I think it's hard to speak 60 to 70 minutes in a row without having, if one wants to be devious, a devious reporter mischaracterizing what you say. And that's what happened here.
I know the reporter personally. I wouldn't characterize him as devious, to be fair, but I understand your complaint. I wonder, sir, what you make of this. President Biden, here's what he posted, because the president and the campaign are going to jump all over it. They already have. He said, quote, "I happen to love Milwaukee." The picture here is when the Milwaukee Bucks, your Bucks, went to the White House recently to celebrate their NBA championship. How do you sort of combat this? Because when you look at your state, as you know better than I do, this is a swing state, and the polling shows this neck and neck, maybe right now within the margin of error. And I wonder if you think this hurts the former president's chances in your home state.
I think people have been trained to realize you can't believe everything you see on TV. The election's going to come down to where people stand on immigration, where people stand on inflation, where people stand on crime for that matter. But the big two issues are going to be inflation and the border. And I think as long as Donald Trump gets that message out there, unless there's something wrong with the American people, he should have no problem winning. You've got other issues, too. Last night, you loved to talk about the electric cars, how horrible they are, the fact you may wind up being forced to buy an electric car if Joe Biden gets reelected. That was another issue he spoke about as well.
Real quick, Congressman, what's the biggest issue as you see it in your home state?
I think the border, because we're going to lose our country if we keep taking
even in Wisconsin. I think sorry, I don't mean to jump in, but I think our audience might say, "Wow, in Wisconsin, that's issue number one."
Well, people aren't idiots. They know America goes up and down together. First of all, we are getting illegal immigrants, but they know if Texas, if Arizona, if Florida go, Wisconsin is going to go too. We cannot have a complete debacle in some of our biggest, most important states and have the rest of the states carry the country.
Congressman Glenn Grothman from just outside of Milwaukee, or as you heard there, grew up there, born and raised, and was inside the meeting today. We appreciate your time, sir, and hope to see you on back here on the Hill in the future.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, you got it. It was interesting to hear because he was inside the room, and I wonder how you think this plays.
Well, we're going to see this in campaign ads until Election Day. And remember, Trump won Wisconsin by 1 point. Right. Biden won by 1 point. So is this going to be the deciding factor? Maybe not. But does it help Trump? No, it doesn't help.
I can tell you my radar, my personal radar from having been at the White House all 4 years that he was there, is when Trump says something and there's a headline, you got to pause, you got to take a deep breath, you got to look at the details to see exactly what was said, which was why I went through the numbers there, because he claims he was talking about crime. And so those are the numbers, TW, but you got to wonder, I just said a lot of words if only the headline gets through.
Right. Well, first and fourmost, Milwaukee's a lovely city. I think he may have used the term, it was a dump, but he said that reportedly about the White House. I don't really think it carries much weight. But everyone's feeling the crime issue that underpins it. You went through some of the numbers. Carjackings are up. Other crimes are up. We see that here in D.C. That's being felt everywhere, including the people of Milwaukee are feeling that. I would guess with the crime numbers as they are in Milwaukee, a lot of people think that their city is quite horrible in the crime aspect. Sure, it might be used in a campaign ad, but Trump didn't burn bridges when he said bad things about John McCain with veterans. He didn't burn bridges when he said bad things about other groups. He'll be okay with it.
How often am I going to see that picture and that post?
Over and over again. Nobody wants to hear their community criticized. I don't care what's going on. I don't care if the crime is bad. I don't care if the numbers don't line up.
That's not in my backyard, right? Don't mess with
call my city names.
Right.
Well, First of all, I hope to see the Celtics at the White House.
You're getting close.
Look,
you're getting close.
The Boston mayor's horrible. If you said the communist mayor of Boston is a horrible mayor and she's making our city worse, I would agree with that. I wouldn't take offense to that as somebody born in Boston.
All right. Today, by the way, 9 Senate members donned their finest striped suits in honor of National Seersucker Day. Did you know? The Southern-inspired occasion was led by the Louisiana Senator, would you look at them, Bill Cassidy, the Georgia Senator Raphael Warnock, bipartisan. Senator Warnock stepped up as co-chair after the death of the California Senator Dianne Feinstein. That, just some of the scene up on the Hill today. And when we return here on the Hill, on the other side of the break, Leland Vittert and one of his favorite topics, and he might roast me as well. You're watching The Hill here on NewsNation. All right, so before we say goodbye, here's a story that caught our eye. By our, I mean me and Vittert. Take a look at this headline from the Wall Street Journal today, reading, quote, "A killer golf swing is a hot job skill now." The article reveals how corporate America is eager to hire strong golfers, to network with clients out on the course. Leland Vittert, host of On Balance. This was the article.
I now know why I have this job. I feel as though this was your calling.
No.
College golf, scratch player.
I thought in high school I would never make it onto the PGA Tour. I got to college, and then I knew I would never make it onto the PGA Tour. Here was Leland walks in the studio. I'm laughing. He's like, "What are you laughing about?" Because I'm reading this from the article. It says, if it would have been scandalous in 2019 to have multiple meetings a week on the golf course, but in 2024, if you're producing results, no one's going to say anything's wrong with it. It's kind of the times that we're in right now.
It is the times we're in. I would add to that, no one ever argues with success, which is what Tom Brady was talking about.